on the entire globe. The motion for the day is this House would hold pastors accountable for harms suffered by the congregation at their command, at their demand, at, their utterances. Let's go back to the government side where we have Kosi, so he can let us know exactly what he thinks of this matter, how he looks at this matter, but I guess he's advocating for this particular motion that we do have before us today. 76281885, that's where you can let us know your thoughts, your views on this particular matter. Thereafter, we'll take your calls a bit later on as the show unfolds.
Brunch Entourage. Saturdays and Sundays, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. FM. More talk, more music.
Thank you, Hava. Now, Henry's speech was more all over the place than these conmen pastors who travel all around the country preaching this false Bible that they preach. Because he talked about so many relevant things, but didn't touch on the core issue, is exactly about these conmen. Because you can't deny that the harm does exist. Because when people are refusing to take things like contraceptives because pastor told them not to, and they don't believe in things like ARVs because pastor told them not to, we as a government feel that is the point where we need to intervene. And what you don't realize, we're not labeling the whole church. This is not religious persecution, as you say, because we actually like religion. Like Onika said, we want to weed out these bad pastors. We feel that this policy will allow other pastors who actually aren't from these mushrooming fire churches to be able to say, listen guys, what you're offering to these people is actually nonsense, and like people shouldn't buy into it. Because they didn't answer the question. At the end of the day, when these people face harm, who is there to protect them? Because what happens most of the time, this deals directly with your idea about the legal infringement and how nothing is wrong. Most of the time, all of the legal things that they commit are concealed by the community because they want to protect pastor, because they believe so blindly in all these things they do. And then the second thing you talk about, this idea of choice. This is an ill-informed, false choice. And we believe as the government, when someone can use propaganda and such extreme rhetoric as, like you say, being able to cure AIDS, that is at a point where the government has to step in. And what you also didn't consider is this idea of the effect, because you seem to believe that, look, it's psychosocial or whatever you were trying to say, that it has a placebo effect. There's no placebo effect that will cure you of HIV and AIDS. If you're dying, like, there's nothing about that. So we don't even see where that argument fits in today's debate. But on the first thing, let me tell you about the three things that I'm going to tell you about, right? First of all, this is going to elicit a discussion that'll get people to start to question their pastors and not believe blindly in everything they hear. Because on a second level, right, what you have to realize is this promotes self-evaluation. At the point when the government is now stepping in to do something, people start to question their pastors. So when the pastor says, listen guys, let's all go and jump off Kale Hill because it'll bring us closer to God, they start to now think about that and say, listen, but really, how close to God do I want to be if we have to jump off a hill to do it? This brings about this idea of self-evaluation, and people start to realize the value of why they actually went into religion in the first place. On the second idea, this will tone down the mushrooming of all these fire churches, right? Because essentially what this does, it removes the extremist rhetoric that some of these pastors use to attract people. Because like you guys said in your own admission, these are not the most logical of people that you're talking about. These are people who are desperate, some of the people who are on the fringes of society and are nearly about to die. They will look at any avenue to try and get them out of their poverty or whatever their situation is. This is why it's even more important that the government protects them, because they're extremely vulnerable, and this is subject to abuse because their relationship that they share with a pastor, it's a spiritual relationship. So it becomes even more easier for a pastor to abuse that relationship, which is why it's even more necessary to have a check and balance. And this is where the third argument comes in. I don't have any questions coming from the opposition side, so by their own admission, it means that they're agreeing with everything I'm saying, right? Now, on the third level, right, about the check and balance that this holds, is because we believe as a government, we hold all people in positions of power to some sort of check and balance, right? Like you guys said, when a doctor in his position, people die, there's all sorts of inquiries and things like that. Lawyers, there's all sorts of things, and even to some extent, president. But now, when it comes to these people, pastors, they seem to exist in this holy gambit where nobody is able to touch them just because they're offering this spiritual upliftment to people. We feel as though there needs to be some sort of check and balance that exists, because by your own admission you say there is no qualification to do this. Maybe then what we need to do is set up some sort of government spiritual body, so that the pastors can be held to account on these levels. So we feel as though like this needs to come about. Now on the last level, Mr. Speaker, and this is how we're going to summarize this case, and what this side of the House needed to have dealt with is they needed to have dealt with the subjective relationship and the unfair power that these people have over their people. It is easy for them to manipulate that power and get their people to do whatever they want, because people follow their religion blindly and don't question it. These are the most vulnerable people, and we need to protect them. On the second level, they needed to tell us that when the law fails, because the law simply can't get to these people, because the congregation is going to protect them so heavily, who is going to step in? We're proud to propose this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Kosi. Let's go to the very last speaker for the day today, Mr. Tsolofelo from the opposition side, who is going to let us know his thoughts, his views on this issue. Chief, your 5 minutes begin now. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Baba. Now, I think the government undervalues the value of faith and hope within a society. Because we need to look at situations where medical doctors have told you that you have stage 4 cancer, and regardless of what you do, you're going to die within 2 weeks. Or medical doctors tell you that you have AIDS, and within 3 months you're going to be dead, and there's nothing they can do to help you. In circumstances like that, religion steps in with the rhetoric of God can heal you and gives those people the will to continue to live. We believe that that will is the most important thing in today's debate, which they don't cater for at all. I'm going to look at a couple of points of rebuttals, starting with Chief's speech, right? He tells us that people refuse contraceptives and they refuse to take ARVs because the pastor tells them to. What he doesn't tell us is why those people don't have a right to do that. Because within a democratic state, the right to free choice means that you have the right to make bad choices and deal with the consequences of those choices. So if you don't want to take ARVs because you feel that ARVs aren't going to help you heal, then you shouldn't take ARVs. This is why we live in democratic states. He needs to tell us why that should be changed. He tells us that this is going to elicit discourse and that people will start to reevaluate themselves within societies. We don't think that this is necessarily true, because what's going to happen when the government forces people to stop giving that kind of rhetoric is it's going to be met with even more force from the congregation. The congregation is going to want to stand behind their pastors and support them against the government, and that is going to kill the discourse and all the teachings that the government has been giving people about whatever Chief is talking about. The last thing he tells us is that it removes extremist rhetoric, so kills the mushrooming of churches. We don't see the causal link between extremist rhetoric and the mushrooming of churches, because people don't necessarily go to church because the church has extremist rhetoric. People go to church because they believe in God, and because they believe in God, they want to be close to Him. Let's look at what Annika tells us, right? She tells us that there's deception in churches. But this is already dealt with in the status quo. However, there are laws in place that already stop pastors from, for example, stealing money from people under false pretenses. For example, putting people in harm's way. When pastors do that in the status quo, they are already held accountable. So, for example, when a pastor tells you, don't wear your seatbelt, and you get caught or you die or whatever, he can be held accountable by virtue of his negligence. Those laws already exist. We don't understand why we need now an extra law that deals specifically with pastors that, sort of like alleviates them from everyone else in society. We don't think that that law is necessary. She tells us that the congregation can't think of objectively. I think I handled this under Chief's rebuttal, where I was talking about not all decisions need to be objective. We make decisions because those decisions make us happy on an individual level. What that then means is I don't have to make an objective decision. I can make a decision that's stupid, but it's my decision and the government should respect it, right? So let's look at my argumentation in today's debate. The first argument is religion is an optional activity, right? This is something they don't deal with. Because I opt into religion, this means that the harms that come with religion, I opt into those as well. Much as the same way as a rugby player opts into the sport of rugby, and knows that his feet may be broken or his shoulder may be dislocated or whatever, those are harms that he opts into, and he knows those harms. Except in instances where the pastor does something extremely crazy, like trying to sleep with women in the congregation and giving them HIV or whatever, where we say that those things are already dealt with in the status quo. So because religion is an optional activity, we don't think the government should be telling us when we can opt into and opt out of religion. We think that's a personal choice that should be left as such. And then the most important argument in today's debate, right? Who really is to blame? Is it the good pastors who can heal their congregations? For example, TB Joshua, who gives people money and does all these things? Or is it the bad pastors who are liars to begin with? Because if it is the bad pastors, then why do we have a blanket approach that seems to deal with every congregation and every church within the country? We need to be able to weed out the people who are lying to us and then hold those people accountable. We think that's what the government should be looking at. Before I get into my last arguments, I'll take Chief.
All right, we get that the religion is an option that people can opt into, and people will get the right to make bad choices. But then why should we as a government allow people to command people to make bad choices?
Because this is what they don't understand. It's not a command. When a pastor tells you to do something, you have the option not to do it, which is where the value of choice comes in. Unless they can prove that the pastor forces you to do that thing, we don't think they can win that argument. Let's look at my last argument, the idea of the benefits of faith to the ill and the poor, the people who they say are eating grass, right? These are people who are desperate, and the only thing they have that links them to this life is the fact that they have hope that one day they'll be healed or cured or whatever. When you remove that hope from those people, you're essentially devaluing their lives. You're making sure that their quality of life is lower, and we cannot stand for that. We are so proud to oppose.
Thank you, Tulu. We've got a minute to kill, so why not give it to the listeners on 350013 so they can let us know exactly what they think of the topic for the day today. We're only gonna give it 40 or so seconds, then we go to your last speeches, your conclusions as to your views, your thoughts on this issue for the day today. Obviously, it's something that has been talked about. It's something that has been throughout, all media houses. You talk about your TV, you talk about your radio stations, you talk of your newspapers and so on and so forth, Facebook, Twitter. It's been ongoing for quite some time right now. So I want you to let me know your thoughts, your views on this matter via the phone line on 350013. Let's just take two callers. Then we go to the conclusions for the day today.
3500131.
Let's go to the very first caller for the day today. Okay, caller, you're live. How are you, my brother?
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
Now, the problem with today's debate is that it's really shallow. It only addresses pastors and not talk about the suicide bombing community or the female genital mutilation community in West Africa. Because the problem with faith, what we're doing now is we're trying to argue faith, use and reason. Faith and rationality are not compatible. So whatever these people do in their churches, even if the pastor says he had a revelation or whatever, he doesn't have to use any evidence, as opposed to, in science or in normal society where there has to be evidence. So I don't see how we can abdicate this to the state to interfere with internal issues that are not even based on rationality. Because faith is not about being rational, it's about believing on anything. So in order to deal with this, we will need to have to deal with religion as a whole. Because religion in itself promotes being irrational, promotes believing in, anything that you want to believe in. If you believe in eating grass or in holy semen or whatever you believe in, that's really religion, because religion is not rational. So if you can address the rationality of religion and look at why we should believe in something that's not rational as rational human beings, then we will never really be able to deal with this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Justice Motlhabana. I appreciate your call, my brother. Compliments.
I hope to see you soon, man. Have a good day.
You owe me a lot. We've got to meet. Thanks. Bye. All right, let's go